The following episode features Araminta Robertson, the founder and managing director of Mint Studios, content marketing agency for fintech companies that focuses on customer acquisition and expert positioning. Araminta is based in Edinburgh and also manages the fintech marketing community and is the host of the Market Like a Fintech podcast and Edinburgh's Fintech Happy Hours. Great to have you on, Araminta.
Thanks, Lucy. Great to be here.
So I wanted to start talking about your background because you chose not to go to university and instead start an agency. So can you talk about that?
Sure. So I did go, but it was the online. It was an open university, so it's a virtual university. And I decided to go that route simply because after graduating high school, I needed a break, and sitting in front of a lecture hall for hours just wasn't really my cup of tea, which is ironic since that's pretty much what I do these days as work. But so I just wanted to do something different, and I didn't really like the education system. So I was like, I prefer learning for myself. I'm more of a self-learner or self-taught. So I just did my own thing. I started a blog, and I started writing and reading and documenting a little bit what I was learning, and that was my journey.
So at 18 you started a blog post. How did you figure out what topics to write about?
I was really just reading books that I thought were interesting, and then I would write blog posts about them. And so I started a personal finance website where I would read some books about how to manage your money or investing, because as I'm sure many listeners know, these are topics that we don't really cover in high school, right? No one ever teaches us about how to do our taxes, how to budget, stuff like that. And I didn't really know that either, even though we grew up being really frugal and everything. It still wasn't something that I understood. So I was like, I'm going to try and teach myself about personal finance by reading books on these topics and then writing about it. And that's kind of what I did. And it was an excellent way to understand a topic and then try and kind of break it down.
How did you gain audience in your blog?
SEO mostly, and also community engagement. So I was in like Facebook groups. I even went to a couple of them in person. I used Pinterest. I used, your typical, I think Twitter I used. So social media to get it out there. And then SEO, obviously, like if you're ranking on the first page of Google for how to create a budget as a student, then people are going to discover you. I remember using Reddit as well. So just putting yourself out there, going on podcasts, stuff like that. So I just started with that, really.
So you were trying to help students understand how to manage their money?
Yeah.
Was that your target audience?
Yeah, that's kind of how I started, because I was in that kind of age group as well. And yeah, I was trying to basically explain it for them. And like one of the topics, for example, was adulting, like how to set yourself up for success when you become an adult, or a later adult. It was kind of that age group students, because there were people who maybe didn't have full-time jobs. They were still studying. Maybe they were also on a really, really tight budget. So stuff like that. That was kind of the topics that I was covering, yeah.
So you started this blog post. Have you considered getting a job in finance to further explore this topic? Yeah.
Not really, because I was still studying. It was just not really on my. I didn't want to have like a suit job, going to an office and doing all that stuff. And also, although I'm interested in finance and personal finance, I'm not like a numbers wizard or anything. I'm analytical, but more on the word side of thing. So I'm a writer first, and finance is very much a numbers profession, I would say.
And relationships. Yeah.
So I was kind of figuring things as I go. I wasn't like one of those people who was at like 16. I want to do this. This is how I'm going to do it. Here's a plan. No, I was just like, well, this is interesting. I'm going to write about it, and that's kind of how it started, really.
Mm-hmm. Where did you get the information? Can you talk about the books, the podcasts you listened to?
This was quite a while ago, so I'm not sure if I can remember everything. But it was, as I said, mostly books. So I have actually the book list. I could go through it if you want. But off the top of my head, for example, Jack Bogle's little book little common sense book on, I can't remember what it is, little book on investing, something like that. There was some budget books. There was a lot of blogs also. I was reading a lot of blogs. Some of the well-known ones, like, let me think, Mr. Money Mustache. So there was quite a lot of reading of other people's blogs as well. And there was quite a big, I wouldn't say big, but there was like financial independence community in Europe. So we were kind of like reading each other's posts and so I don't know, it's a bit of everything. I can't remember the name of the books right now, but if you want, I can take a look.
We'll put it in the description.
Sure, yeah, sure.
So how did you get from blogging to starting an agency?
Yeah, so what's great about blogging is that you learn not just about what you're writing about, but you're also learning about content marketing, which is essentially how to write content for an audience and then use that to acquire customers. So a lot of people in the online business world know about this. There's affiliate marketing. There's, niche websites where you make like money on affiliate marketing. And then there's just good old using content marketing to help with product customer acquisition. So helping to get customers for your product. And so as I was working on this blog, I was getting better at ranking on Google for specific keywords. I also had a newsletter. So kind of building an audience, let's just say. And so I also, because I was getting better at this, I started doing it for other companies. And since I was writing about personal finance, the natural progression was to work with finance companies. And this was fintech startups. And inherently, I loved it. Like I remember downloading Starling Bank app for the first time and being like, wow, this is it. This is the future of finance. Because what's interesting about fintech is that it's fintech is a new way of doing things in the finance world. And they're trying to, if there's one mission they all have, it's democratizing finance. And a big part of democratization is education, right? Yeah. And in order to educate your audience, you need to create content, whether it's video, podcast, or written content. But you need to, you can't sell a tax product if your customer doesn't even know how to do their taxes. You need to educate them first. And so content marketing is a really big part of fintech. It's you can't democratize without educating, and content is part of educating. So it really worked well with kind of my own, like why I liked writing to educate others and help others. And then I was working with these companies who were trying to do the same. So it was quite a good like partnership, I would say. And I became like a freelance writer then. And then after that, I moved on. Not only was I writing for these companies, but I was actually helping them get customers, which is a lot more interesting and a lot more useful to them, a lot more valuable. But I can go into this later if you want, but there were a few gaps in the market I was noticing when it comes to freelance writing. And I was a bit frustrated with the model. Because a lot of freelance writers tend to write content that is more, we call it top of the funnel, which is like educational content, but not really content that helps with customer acquisition. So that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this differently, and I'm going to help these companies use content for customer acquisition, but I can't really do this by myself because it is a lot of work. And so that's when I set up a team, started hiring, and here we are 1 year later with an agency.
How did you build relationships with those companies?
As a freelancer...
Did they notice you, or did you come to them?
A bit of both at the beginning. I think I remember doing outbound at the beginning. And then I set up a website, mintcopywritingstudios.com, and I started writing on there about how to do content marketing for fintech companies. And you just start small, you start creating content for that website, ranking on Google again for very specific keywords, and then building relationships on LinkedIn. And building relationships is, commenting on other people's posts, doing a podcast, that really helped. Setting up a community, interacting with others. Like there's no hard and fast, like this is how you build relationships. It was really like kind of organic. And now it's a lot more fun because I can do a lot more stuff in person. So hosting events and going to conferences, speaking at conferences, that's a lot more fun now. I've done it a lot virtually, and now I'm like, okay, I need to do more in-person stuff.
I'm just figuring out this part of sort of influencing and getting attention. If you're a podcaster, your podcast is not going to take off on its own. Like you have to go out there and be an influencer yourself, go to events, speak on panels to get noticed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the conundrum between the never-ending like debate between product and marketing. People say, oh yeah, you can build a product. As long as the product is great, people will come. And then they build a product and then like, oops, no one comes.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's because you need to do marketing from day one.
Yeah.
And
you
I'm
need to build trust.
Yeah, and I'm actually of the side that you can have a terrible product, but if you're really good at marketing, you'll be fine. And there's so many real life examples of this. I'm sorry, Heineken, Red Bull, like that product.
Is Red Bull that bad?
I'm not a fan personally, but Heineken, like, come on, that is not real beer. And yet they're everywhere. And that's just evidence that if you're really good at marketing, the product, I mean, and I do want a good product as well. I'm not saying don't do a good product, but I'm just saying like marketing is like, I would say it comes first.
Another example would be the influencer culture. A lot of influencers, actors, singers have products and brands that just are not great, right? Cosmetic products, makeup, drinks, merchandise that's low quality. People still buy it.
Yeah, because they have distribution, right? They have awareness and marketing.
And they have the audience.
Yeah, audience is it's like number one. And it's hard. It's really hard to build an audience. It takes time.
When did you decide to take the leap and go from being an independent writer to setting up your own company?
So it's funny because I did it a couple of times and it failed. And it was at the third time that I was like, okay, finally, makes more sense. And for the simple reason that when you're really good at writing, outsourcing to cheaper writers is not a business model and anyone who's tried this will agree with this. It's incredibly stressful because you think, right, I'm getting more business than I can handle. So logically, the next step would be to outsource some of it and then take a cut, right? But it doesn't work in the world of writing because first of all, when people work with you, it's because of your style and it's of your ability. And so cheaper writers are just going to be worse off. So then you just spend a lot of time editing other people's work and it just doesn't make sense. So I tried that like twice and it just didn't work out. And I was like, I need to completely rethink how I do things. And so there are two resources that really helped me figure out a business model. One was the book They Ask You Answer, which is an excellent book. And anyone who's in content marketing, to me, it's like the Bible. You should really read it. And the next one is a course by the agency Grow and Convert, who are an excellent agency, excellent content marketing agency. And it basically, with these two resources, I realized what I need to do here is not help with execution. I need to help with basically strategy, with like from the beginning. And that way you have more control over the process, over the delivery of the service. So what I really need to start with is helping our clients get to the end goal, which is customer acquisition. So start with that. And so we devised like a framework that we use to help fintech companies use content for customer acquisition. And we're not just writers, and we don't just outsource to cheaper writers. Like a lot of content agencies compete on how fast they deliver articles and perhaps how good. But we compete on how many like outcomes, like how many customers we're generating for you. And that when you flip that on its model, then it's a lot easier to sell to a client or explain it to a client. And it also means that we're focused on strategy and execution and not just one. But yeah, anyway, so that's a long answer, but yeah.
So are you helping train employees of the company write good content that will help them convert customers?
It depends on the company. Like if they have in-house writers, we could. But in our experience, because we work with, usually they've got pretty small marketing teams. In our experience, if they've got someone in-house, they'll let the in-house person do like the more top of the funnel, educational, beginner type content or other type of copywriting. Yeah. And then we're going to come in and we'll help with the customer acquisition side of things. Because what we do is very different to what, like you need to know about SEO, you need to know about content marketing. And we have a lot of experience. We know what works, what doesn't. So we come in and do the customer acquisition, and then the writer, usually in-house, if they have already one, they'll do like top of the funnel. But if they wanted to, yeah, we can train, definitely, because it's not complicated.
You talked about hiring other people into your agency.
Yeah.
Who are the people you've hired? How did you pick them?
Yeah, so we're a team of 5 at the moment, and they're all really, really good. I mean, once again, through relationships. So I'm in Slack groups. It's been a mix of Slack groups, asking friends for referrals, going to an in-person conference actually helped hire someone. I'm trying to think of our team. One was like an old friend, and we have I don't want to say strict, but we have a process to hire. So for example, for a writer, we ask them first of all to send samples, and then they do a paid test. So the test is like a portion of what we do. We pay them. We ask them to do it, and this has been the best way to really see like how good quality they are. Like their
Did you
content.
make the test?
Yeah. So it's like a questionnaire test, and if they pass that, then we'll give them a couple of articles to see how they get on, paid obviously, and then if everything goes well, then that's it. They're on board.
So you pay them to take a test.
Yeah, exactly. Because it takes a while.
Wow.
Well, this because we wanted them to spend time on it,
Yeah.
and I like to think that if you're going to spend over an hour on it, then you should probably be paid for it, because it does take time, and we understand that. So yeah, and that test has really helped in like determining if they're a good fit or not. And it's also for them actually to see if for them our style, because we have a very specific process of doing things, specific way of doing things, and it's a really good way for them to see if it's a good fit for them. So
what's in the test?
Both ways. So the way that we like to produce a piece, because each article helps with customer acquisition, it's quite product focused, these articles. So let's take an example. Imagine that our client is a sunglasses company and it's Polaroid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And the types of articles that we'll write is stuff like Polaroid versus, I don't know, Ray-Bans. So we're targeting people who already know they have a problem, already know what the solution is, sunglasses, and they're actively looking for it. Now they're trying to figure out which brand. And in order to do these articles well, you need to understand the product. And so that's why for each article, we do an interview with someone in the client's team, to understand, why would someone pick this product? What are the competitive advantages? What are the pain points of the target market? And each article is then based on that interview. So our process is something like, the writer listens to that interview, and then they need to be the ones to fill in a brief. So if any freelance writers are listening, often it's like the client gives you the brief and then you do the writing. But the way we do it is the writer fills in the brief, because they're the ones, like we trust them to be able to figure out who is the target market, how we should frame it. So they fill in that questionnaire, and then there's a strategist that reviews it, and then the writer writes the first draft, and then blah, blah, blah. So that questionnaire, that's the test. So we give them an interview and the questionnaire, and we say, let's see how you get on, and this is how we do it. And it's been really a good way of assessing people.
That's a very unique way to do things.
Yeah, well, it's very similar to how Grow and Convert do things. So that's how I got the idea. I didn't come up with it myself, but it's a really clever way of doing things, because I like to say that our agency is writer led. There's a lot of agencies where writers are treated like robots. Mm-hmm. So it's produce 2 articles a month, 1,000 words, here are the topics, there you go. And then do some research yourself to figure out how to write it. But we're doing something different. We're trying to help with customer acquisition, so we can't just do that, right? So it's a much more collaborative process where we're sitting down and really trying to understand who is researching this, what information are they looking for, why are they comparing you to someone else, or what are their pain points, and what would encourage them to sign up or a conversion, whatever that means. So it's a bit of a different. We've kind of flipped it on its head, and also the writers prefer it. I mean, I set up this agency because as a writer, I was tired of creating content that I knew no one was reading. And let's be honest, there's a lot of freelance writers who feel this way. And it's I write this article and I know, apart from the client, no one's going to read it. And then the other reason was it's just not doing as much as it could. I feel this article could help with customer acquisition. And it's such a good feeling when you write an article, people are reading it, and it's helped the client get 100,000 plus dollars in customers. Isn't that such an amazing feeling? So it's a lot more rewarding as a writer, and that's kind of why I think our writers like to work with us in the long term.
That's awesome. You mentioned treating writers as robots, which brings me to AI and ChatGPT.
Okay.
Where do you see this new technology in terms of producing content? Do you think that this technology will replace writers, will replace humans? Do you think it will help writers write better content?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have written an article on this topic. My position is that I think it's a good thing because, and the article goes into a lot more detail on why I think this, but to summarize it, I think ChatGPT will basically reduce the number of bad writers in the market. Because the thing about writing is it's a bit like marketing where the barrier to entry is quite low. Anyone could call themselves a writer. But anyone who's done writing knows how difficult it is. And good writing looks easy because it's easy to read, but it's so hard to do. So I'm hoping basically that ChatGPT will basically reduce the number of bad writers. Because I mean, if you had to choose between spending, I don't know, £100 on a below average article or a zero and using ChatGPT, well, you're going to pick ChatGPT. And so I'm hoping that it will, as I said, reduce the number of bad writers, and then the really good ones will really stand out even more because you can really tell that it's written by a person. And so I'm hoping that it will mean that really good writers will get, better pay and also a lot more respect for what they do. People will finally be like, oh, wow, yeah, writing is hard. Like, that is really good what you've done there. So I think it's a good thing, but to be honest, I could be wrong. Who knows? Maybe in 2 or 3 years, ChatGPT is just as good as an excellent writer. We'll see. We kind of take it as it comes, I think. But so far, we don't really use ChatGPT. You kind of have to pay for it now these days to really. It's always down when I check it. I think it's good for idea generation, maybe for like copywriting for product descriptions. For the kind of writing that we do, I haven't seen an application just yet, but who knows, maybe in 2 years it'll change, or 1 year.
I've seen there is a new app that helps students write essays that was built on ChatGPT, and there are all these influencers that are promoting it. And I think in the way ChatGPT will, remove the bad writers, ChatGPT will also remove the bad students and reveal who are the students that actually take the time to write their own essays and have original thinking.
Yeah, I mean,
so those students will really shine.
It's difficult because I feel like it's a little bit unfair in university that everything has to be an essay. Like, there's some people who prefer
speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Or I don't know, prefer expressing themselves in different ways. Why does it always have to be written? I am also of the mind that everyone should learn how to write well, but it's true that not everyone expresses themselves that way.
Writing reflects clarity of thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can't write, you're not a good thinker.
Yeah, it's difficult because, and this is why it's so hard to find good writers, because a good writer is someone who can think clearly. But yeah, I don't know. I've also met some really clever people who maybe the writing wasn't as good. So I'm not sure, but yeah, it's definitely linked. But yeah, as I was saying, like if ChatGPT was around in high school, I would have definitely used it, because there was so much stuff they made us do in high school that I was like, this is just such a waste of my time. I don't care. So, maybe ChatGPT will help with changing the education system, which really badly needs reform. So who knows? We'll see. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Who do you think are the best writers of our time?
So you mean still alive, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Yeah, so
what Substacks are you reading?
Quite a few. So obviously I read a lot of fintech. I know, so it depends. Do you want fintech writers?
Anything.
Or?
Fintech,
right,
general.
okay.
We talked about Sam Harris, you're a fan.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson.
not so much anymore. But yeah. So in terms of, I follow quite a few newsletters. So in the fintech space, I really like a guy called Simon Taylor at 11FS. His essays are absolutely fantastic. So in depth. He's an expert, absolute expert himself. So it's really amazing. And I think anyone who subscribes to him, like, he's probably one of the best. There's so many fintech thought leaders, but there's a lot of really good ones. So yeah, so Simon Taylor, I really like Packy McCormick. He's more in the like tech essays. He also has like a fund. Who else? Alex Johnson is another one in the fintech space. I really, really like Mario Gabriel. I don't know if you've heard of him, but wow, his essays are incredibly in depth. There's so many. To me, what's so amazing about newsletters and Substack is like so much good content, and it's free. Like you couldn't have this 20 years ago. And you know, as someone who grew up in the middle of nowhere in Spain, it's just so, that access to an incredible mind for free. It's just, that's the power of the internet. But yeah, so that's in terms of Substacks. And then in terms of authors, I'm currently reading Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which is controversial. Yeah, he's quite controversial.
Financial.
His writing style is quite interesting. And I think that's why I like reading his books, because it's very different, but it's still readable.
Isn't it very technical?
You can skip those parts. And he lets you know. He's like, by the way, this is going to be technical. You can skip it if you don't want it. I'm like, okay, fine. But he incorporates a bit of his personal story. And I know this is quite, probably in the academic world, people really don't like that because it's like, oh, you're introducing bias. But it makes it more interesting to read. And that's why I really like Jared Diamond, the historian, or I guess he's kind of an anthropologist. But his books, he always talks a bit about himself. And yeah, sure, maybe, and he admits his bias, but I think that's what makes it interesting. So I really love his books. I've read like 4 of his books. Who else have I ever read? I mean, I'd have to probably go through my list. But
what are the main thoughts of Nicholas Taleb? Because he's considered one of the best thinkers of our time, and
really?
I never read any of his work. It's on my to-do list.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I'm not saying I agree with everything. I mean, I don't think anyone does. He says what he says, but that's why I like reading his books, because they're so different. Like the stuff he says in there is very not at all common advice. Even the way he works out. If you've read his book, he talks about how he works out, and it's like, what?
Can
why
you give
do
us
you do
examples?
This? Yes. So his working out style is instead of like going to the gym for an hour, he'll go to the gym for 15 minutes and just do the maximum weight, and then that's it. And then he's like such a character. But I think that's what makes him interesting.
He doesn't look like he's working out. I don't think.
Oh yeah, but he's really big, right? Like
yeah. But
okay,
in the other sense.
Okay. I thought he was like, I've never seen him.
Maybe
I thought he was like big and muscly. I don't know. Yeah. I can't think of other examples, but yeah, he's got some very interesting, I mean, he hates economists, which is also very interesting. He doesn't like academics.
He's one of the best hedge fund managers out there as well. So he's sort of at the intersection of academia, but also finance, the industry.
Yeah. But he's a practical person.
Yeah.
And I think that's his main criticism of like academia, is that it's a lot of it is theory and not like, how does this look like in practice? And that's what all his books revolve around is risk, right? And a lot of academics will say, oh, well, this was not part of our model. And it's like, well, that's because there's certain things that you can't model, especially when you don't know what to expect. I mean, anyway, I'm not an expert on this, not an academic, so I'm not very good at like explaining his point of view. The best would be to read his book, but I always feel a little bit more, clearer on things. Enlightened after reading his books. But once again, I know he's controversial, and he has some, interesting views.
Why is Sam Harris one of your favorite thinkers? He's also controversial.
Yeah, he is also very controversial. I, once again, do not agree with everything that he talks about. But I like him because he tries to toe the line between, different political parties. And I think he does try to be... He does try to have opposing views on his podcast. So he'll have Democrats, he'll also have Republicans. And I respect that because it's difficult.
He wouldn't have Trump on.
No, he would definitely not have Trump on. And there's some people he won't have on. He actually says that for interesting reasons, actually. So, I like him because he tries to be level-headed, although, sometimes, not all the time. But, just respect that what he's doing is really difficult. And I respect that he keeps doing it. He gets hate from so many people, and he keeps doing it. That's brave. So I think it's interesting. And the guests that he has on are interesting as well. And he has a bit of everything. He doesn't just have academics and politicians. He also has tech people. So he had like the founder of Superhuman on. And he has people from all walks of life. And I think that's what makes it interesting.
He also has a lot of female thinkers. female influencers, right? That
he could probably
do
have
not get
more
the attention they deserve.
Yeah, he has. Well, we talked about this like a few days ago, right? He has a lot of female like guests who have an interesting story, but more because of their story rather than their thoughts.
Why is that? Why are women defined by their
Yeah,
suffering and negative experience?
Well, maybe that's just Sam Harris. I'm not sure if it's across the board.
Versus their thinking.
But yeah, no, I agree. He could probably have more women on to ask about their thinking. I don't know. You'd have to ask him, to be honest. I'm not sure. But I agree with you. I do wish we had more women on podcasts that would talk about like just, their opinions or their thoughts on a specific topic rather than just their story. Right?
Yeah. I wish more men would want to listen to women. I had a guest on the podcast and he thought my audience is only females.
Really? Why? Because you're a female? Yeah.
Young female.
I don't know. I think they do. It's just they haven't really thought about it, maybe, or I don't know. I don't think I'd put the blame on them. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Yeah. How about Jordan Peterson? Why have you changed your mind on him?
Yeah, he's become too extreme, I think, now. And I liked his lectures from years ago, the ones that he did as a lecturer. They were interesting because he was mostly focusing on religious topics, right? And how they apply to real life, which is not at all what he focuses on now. He focuses on very political topics. And yeah, as we spoke about, he tries to push an agenda, which is just tiresome. It's like, we just want to have a debate on an interesting topic where you always have to push an agenda. So I'm not a huge fan anymore. But yeah, he did have some interesting ideas before. Yeah.
I think he's become too toxic on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he shuts down different perspectives. If you look at his podcast, he only has people that confirm his viewpoint. He's not open to listening to the woke camp, as he calls.
Yeah.
Which I think is a mistake.
Yeah, well, actually, Nassim Nicholas Taleb recently tweeted something funny saying, I can't remember what it was, but he said something like, Jordan Peterson to intellectualism is like, I can't remember, but yeah, it was something like fake, basically. Yeah. He's not really an intellectual. He just pretends to be.
If you were 18 again, would you do the same thing? Would you have done anything differently? What's your advice to 18-year-olds or even university students? Yeah,
once again, like, I think everything is so contextual and it all depends on how you grew up, your values, what you have financially, your opportunities. It's just incredibly hard to give advice. Actually, I don't really like giving advice because I'm like, it just depends too much. So all I can talk about is what worked for me. And in the situation that I was in, I just knew I needed to explore, get out, leave the country, work abroad. That was what really worked well for me.
You mean leave Spain or UK?
Yeah, Spain. I graduated high school in Spain, and I was like, I know I need to just get out and travel and explore and work abroad. I think not just living abroad, but working and being surrounded by other cultures really. So I lived in China for like 6 months. That was really eye-opening, completely. Like, that was amazing.
Were you working, studying?
Yeah, both actually. Yeah, I was teaching English and I was studying Mandarin. So that was really amazing, completely eye-opening. Like, anyone who's been is like, yeah, you really realize that the world is really big. So that's what worked for me, which is traveling abroad and working abroad. But that's because I could do it and I was in the right position to do it. But it might not be what works for other people, you know? So it's kind of hard to tell. But that is what worked for me.
Mm-hmm. Who do you discuss major decisions with? If you're, moving to a different country, doing a new project, getting a new job, do you have a mentor? Do you discuss with your family, with your boyfriend?
Yeah, so mostly my boyfriend with everything. He's like my partner in everything. Probably him, and then maybe I have a weekly call with my dad and my brother, which is really nice. So I might talk to them. And I do have a mentor, but that's more for like agency stuff. So if it was agency related or business related, I'd probably talk to them. If it was sales related, I have another like group. So I'd talk to them about sales. So yeah, it depends a bit on the topic.
But and you're leveraging your Slack community, I assume.
Yeah, that's for anything marketing related, I guess. Yeah. The Slack group is really useful. And I'm in like 10 Slack groups. So I don't run out. I love asking for advice, actually,
Yeah.
ironically, but I'm someone who really thrives on mentorship. Like because I'm a bit of I don't know if perfectionist is the right word, but I want to do things right. I don't want to make stupid mistakes. So I'm always like, before making a decision, I'm asking like 10 different people. What did you do? What would you do? Have you done this before? And then once I think I understand the problem, then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to make a decision. So I'm like, I have a lot of different people that I like to
How did you find those
ask.
people? Slack.
Yeah, Slack, Twitter, LinkedIn. You just kind of, once you stay in an industry for a while, you just kind of get into the right spots. Going to in-person conferences as well has been really great. Podcasts, and just spending a lot of time on the internet. Like, I grew up with the internet. I was, for me, it was Tumblr that really I was addicted to. And it's really interesting because it's a very different mindset to even my partner, my boyfriend, who didn't seem to catch on to the internet as much as I did. And so I'm very much a marketing first person, where if I want to buy something, I'm going to research it. I'm going to read reviews. I'm going to read blog posts about it. I love doing my own research. I love knowledge and then making a decision. Whereas he's more of a salesperson, where he'd rather like just talk to someone on the phone and be like, what do you think? What should I do? It's a very different mindset. And I think the people who grew up with the internet, like I hate doing things on the phone, as in, calling up someone to book a reservation, much rather do it online. Whereas my partner is the opposite. So I think that's really interesting. And I grew up with that internet kind of mentality. And that's kind of what we help fintech companies with as well. Like, use the internet to your advantage, or content, or Google. So I really like doing things that way.
I think you're one of the very few people who do research before purchasing a product.
What?
And not just look at brand. I think a lot of people just look at brand and they assume, oh, that's the best product, that's the best quality. And they don't look at other options.
That is not my experience.
Or they look at the influencer that produces the product. Right.
Okay, so for something like a big purchase, like a bicycle, an electric bicycle, you would probably do your research. Like, unless you're a multimillionaire and you don't care. In my experience, people love doing research because it's addictive knowledge, right? And I'm not just talking research on Google. You'll then go to Instagram and you'll see, okay, what are people saying about it? You might go to TikTok, you might go to Twitter. Or a lot of people on Twitter like just post a tweet and they're like, I'm thinking of buying this. What do you think? In my experience, people love doing research. And it's very different this is why marketing is taking up a bigger proportion of the purchase, whereas before it used to be more like the sales. But now people just don't want to talk to a salesperson. They want to do their research online, read the reviews, like on Amazon, for example, and then buy it online. They don't want to talk to, because that's how it used to be, right? You'd talk to someone. If you wanted to buy an electric bike, these were not a thing. If you wanted to buy a bike or a motorcycle, you'd talk to a salesperson or a car.
Who was extremely biased towards the product
selling.
Yeah,
there was obviously issues with that. But now it's very different. People want to do research online. Like, before we go to a restaurant, we're going to check the reviews, right? And we'll go on Google Maps and we'll see what other people think. It's just addictive because it's, I can finally make a better decision by seeing what other people have done.
Yeah. What do you think about Amazon reviews? A lot of people complain that Amazon reviews have become biased and they don't reflect the opinions of the people.
I don't know enough about Amazon, to be honest. I still read them, but it is true that sometimes I'm like, it's because everything's going to have also negative reviews, so it's kind of hard at this point to make a decision. So maybe you can also go on look at other sites that are not Amazon and see what people think. I like that as well. Like reading a personal blog on, I purchased this and it worked well for me or not. So the best I think you can do is keep researching. So
how does AI play a role in our decision making? Right, these days algorithms determine what we get recommended, what we see when we search something. Yeah, is that good? Is that bad? Do you have any advice on how to approach researching on Google, on other platforms?
Yeah, I know this is something that people are talking about a lot. I think it hasn't played out long enough for us to really be able to tell what's going to happen. A lot of people are saying ChatGPT is going to replace Google, but that to me doesn't make sense, because ChatGPT gives you one answer, but what's addictive is being able to see a lot of different answers. So when I finish a movie, I love reading like people who loved it and people who hated it, because I find it so interesting, and I'm sure other people do as well. So that's what makes knowledge, like or deciding or whatever it is, really interesting, is seeing other perspectives. So I think they're just different use cases. And so you might use ChatGPT to help you with something that's factual, that there's no 2 + 2 is 4, like there's no other perspective on that. But then if you're trying to see other perspectives, you might go to Google. So I think they're not going to replace, they're more like complementary maybe.
Well said. Cool. What else? What else do you have to say?
What else do I have to say? I'm not sure. I think as I said before, I think what worked well for me was exploring a lot of different things. Like I think that if you don't like what you're doing, it's good to try and there's a really good book on this called, what is it called again? I don't have it.
We'll put it in the description.
We'll put it in the description. Yeah. But it was a book that I always read it when I'm like not really sure what to do with my life, or I'm not very happy.
Yeah.
And I recently gave it to my partner who was in that situation, and he really liked it. And it's a really like kind of a step-by-step of here's how to analyze what you like doing and what you don't. Because I think at 18, there's so much pressure to pick a what you're going to study. Yeah. And I think it's incredibly unfair. At 18, how can you be expected to know what you want to do? You haven't even tried anything.
In the UK, that's the case. In the US, you have extra 2 years to decide. The first 2 years are always generic.
Oh, yeah, they're liberal arts, right? Yeah, I mean, even, to be honest, even at 20, like, how are you supposed to know I'm still trying to figure out what I like doing, right? So, and yeah, you're put into this 4-year program. You don't really know if you're going to like it. And then by the end of it, you're not even guaranteed a job, right? Yeah. So I think it's okay to, like, test things. So I remember what I did is I put together, like, seven different career paths that I'd be interested in pursuing. And I was like, how can I test them? Well, there's a few ways to test them. You can read books on the topic. You could actively do an internship. So one of them was like working in the charity space. And I tried to do it. And I've read a few books about it. And then I was like, okay, maybe this is not yet anyway. This is not what I want to do just yet. So there are ways to methodically like test different things and then figure out what you want to do with your life. Because what you want to do with your life, I think, is the most important question. And I remember reading a really good book on this, actually, and it was titled, What Do I Want to Do With My Life? And the takeaway from the author was like, people are ashamed to admit that they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
And
they should be given more time.
More time and more opportunities.
More failures.
And it's okay if you don't know what you want. There's so much pressure, again, at 18 or 17 to know what you want. And I think it's just okay to be like, I'm just going to, if you can afford, obviously, to work abroad. I was an au pair for like 3 months. An au pair is a really good way because you get paid to basically take care of kids and stuff. That was a really good way of, on a very small budget, working abroad. Yeah. So there are ways. And I just think, working abroad is a really good way of testing and learning about yourself. And then, But anyway, to be honest, I'm figuring things out. I do not have all the answers. And who knows, in 10, 20 years, I could be saying something completely different. So.
Well, come on the podcast in 10 years.
In 10 years. I'll let you know how I'm getting on. So, yeah.
Cool. What do you want people to know? How can they find you, your work, your community?
Yeah, so our website is mintcopywritingstudios.com, LinkedIn, Araminta Robertson, Twitter, MintC Studios. And you can just, if you want to have a chat, just DM on Twitter or LinkedIn.
It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.